Gunter Gumli III was a dwarven noble from a long line that was very, very, very cursed. So with the help of some ancient tomes, he made a pact with an elder brain in the hopes this would break his curse. In return, he's been commanded to investigate what appears to be the workings of a different elder brain. Now he'll have to use his noble bearings, what little luck he has left, and a whole lot of chutzpah to get to the bottom of what's going on, and all while avoiding the peasant folk. But first, the rules. Rule number 1. No other party members that have their own detached portrait. Summons and temporary companions such as Shovel are a-okay. Number 2. No multiclassing. We're Warlock and nothing but Warlock. Number 3. No using illithid powers whatsoever, since I want to show off just how cool Warlocks can be on their own. Number 4. No respecking. We gotta plan out our build well, and any mistakes in that process we stick with. Number 5. No barrelmancy. That includes chestmancy to block doorways and other such nonsense as well. Number 6. No saving in the middle of combat. We're gonna have to work for our victories. Number 7. No karmic dice. This is to make the combat more of an authentic D&D experience and get true RNG. And finally, number 8. No changing the difficulty at any point. This is a tactician run after all. As a side note real quick, these videos take a ton of time and effort to make, so I'd really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. With that out of the way, on to character creation. As previously stated, we're going a dwarf, specifically shield dwarf for the medium armor proficiency since we love not getting hit. We are also naturally a warlock, taking Eldritch Blast and Minor Illusion as our cantrips and going Great Old One for our patron, giving us access to some cool spells but also making it so when we crit, enemies in an area have a chance to get frightened. For our leveled spells, we end up going with Hex and Armor of Agathis for a mix of survivability and damage, while our background ends up being noble to go nice with our backstory. And our ability scores end up looking like this, with an emphasis on charisma as well as dexterity, which won't be immediately useful past initiative boost but will help out our AC as we get later in the playthrough. Our skill proficiencies also end up befitting a dwarf of our lineage, with history, deception, intimidation, and persuasion. Now we've just got to nail the noble look, and boy do we ever. And thus a new legend, Gunter Gumli III, is born. Our noble warlock awakens in a crashing nautiloid after his investigation got out of hand and he ended up infected with an enemy parasite. Now he's got to get out of here before it's too late. Along the way, a common soldier by the name of Lae'zel jumps us, and as she's threatening us, we in turn get jumped by some nearby imps. We quickly explain to her that she's unworthy to be in our presence, and she graciously understands and jumps off. Then we use Hex on one of the imps in our very first Eldritch Blast. Though it doesn't kill, just a few more on each of the imps takes them all out, and that's our first encounter done. As we arrive at the helm, we see quite the battle going on between mind flayers and devils, but fighting is to be done by foot soldiers, so we go dashing straight towards the control tentacles at the end of the room to teleport us back to somewhere safer. Unfortunately, the family curse kicks in and stray debris sends us plummeting down towards a rocky beach below, whereupon our patron is nice enough to catch us. The next morning we awaken ready to continue our task and hopefully get the enemy tadpole out of our head. Gunter gets exploring and we find a couple intellect devourers that we get the jump on, causing them to go down pretty fast to a couple Eldritch Blasts. A little further in the wreckage we find a mind flayer that doesn't even get the honor of our boot to finish it off. And just nearby we find a swirling portal with presumably a peasant stuck inside asking for help, but we've got bigger things to worry about than the common folk, such as getting a vantage point from the nearby ruins where we stumble across some folks arguing with each other. We're able to scare them off easy enough by using our knowledge of the occult, and this gets us enough experience for level 2. Level 2 grants us another spell slot alongside a spell to go with it, for which we choose Protection from Evil and Good, though it won't be with us for long. We also get Eldritch Invocations, for which we choose Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast. Both of these buff up our Eldritch Blast in various ways, with Agonizing letting us add our Charisma mod to its damage and Repelling pushing away any enemies we hit with it. We're already much stronger. From our vantage point, we were able to spot some hubbub nearby in the form of goblins from the cult we're investigating attacking a camp. And despite having to help some bumbling bumpkins, we decide to get involved in case they can help us in return. We spend our turns using Hex to inflict more damage before blasting enemies, but the curse is still strong. Some of our temporary allies seem to know what they're doing, but unfortunately the grotesque goblins evidently have a much better grasp on things. Still, things start to turn in our favor as time goes on, and though some of our underlings die, it's worth it since it leaves our foes ripe for finishing off. With the fight done, we head inside the Druid Grove and find tensions are high between the landlords and the tiefling tenants hiding out here from the goblins. Regardless, we go chat with the Druid leader Kaga and find her in the middle of trying to murder a child who was caught attempting to steal their sacred idol. We use this as an opportunity to assert our authority over the Druid and as a side effect free the child. Now both sides of camp know that we mean business. Since the druids seem unlikely to be useful, we track down a thieves guild run by the tiefling children, where they offer us a reward in exchange for stealing the sacred idol, a reward that we really want, so we tell them we'll get around to it and then get back to exploring the wilderness. As we do, we encounter a strange man named Raphael, who appears out of thin air. It's easy enough from his sulfurous scent to identify him as a devil, and sure enough he offers us a deal in order to remove the tadpole we've got. But we've already got one patron that we are more than happy with, so we tell this belittling babbler to keep his presumptions to himself and bugger off. Continuing on, we find quite the good boy out in the wilderness. Unfortunately, the curse hits hard and we're unable to calm him down. Our patron, however, is nice enough to reset his memory and let us try again, where we learn his name is Scratch. We give him our scent so he can follow us later and move on. Just nearby is a village being occupied by goblins. It's not hard to convince them that we belong, whereupon we pick up the haste helm from a nearby chest. This is a pretty straightforward helmet that gives 3 turns of momentum at the start of each combat. For each turn remaining, we get 1.5 meters of additional movement to help us get into position when we need it. We also managed to hit level 3 from this conversation, increasing our spell slots up to level 2 and letting us choose the Pact of the Tome, which grants Guidance, Vicious Mockery, and Thorn Whip as extra cantrips. Guidance is phenomenal for helping us get past skill checks. Vicious Mockery is pretty much useless, and Thorn Whip has its occasional uses for pulling enemies into pits. In addition, we get to choose another spell in the form of Darkness, and we swap out Protection from Evil and Good for Cloud of Daggers, since the scrolls are easy enough to come by. Darkness is real good and gets straight up silly in certain fights with how it affects enemies, whereas Cloud of Daggers is just some nice consistent AoE damage. While we're in the village, we decide to have some fun. We scare off some more goblins, play the age-old game how far can you catapult a peasant, and get looting a hidden occult basement that reminds us of home. Notably, we grab a scroll of Summon Quasit and a tome called the Necromancy of Thay. After using the scroll, we summon Shovel, a very eager Quasit who is more than happy to act as our new familiar, especially when we tell her our future plans. And since we're a warlock, we gain the ability to summon her whenever we want, once per short rest. Further north, we come across a burning inn and learn that Grand Duke Ravengard could be inside. Gunter is well aware of how important it is to have nobles that owe you, so we get rescuing. Unfortunately, as we get to the top and blast open the doorway, all we find is Counselor Floric instead. Either way, when we get outside, she rewards us with the Spell Sparkler, a quarterstaff that grants us 2 lightning charges when we deal damage with a spell or cantrip. Lightning charges decay at a rate of 1 per turn, but so long as we have at least 1, we gain a +1 to attack rolls and we deal an extra lightning damage on everything. Should we reach 5, the next time we deal damage, we do an extra D8 lightning and the charges are consumed. It's just a temporary item for us, but that doesn't mean it's not amazing. Now that we've got a bit more power, we double back towards the village and climb down the well where we could hear some strange noises. Before we go too far, we turn Shovel invisible and drop an Armor of Agathis on ourselves. Sure enough, we find the biggest spiders you ever did see in need of squashing, so we get the drop on them with a Cloud of Daggers, and as they're reeling from the shock, we start blasting at another one. In retaliation, that one tries to shoot us to no avail, while our cloud shreds apart the 2 appalling arachnids caught inside. One does barely survive and runs up to us, but Shovel is waiting patiently for just this moment. When it gets back to us, we use a well-placed Thorn Whip to pull the phase spider into our cloud, bringing it low enough to die when it tries to take a turn. The poor remaining fool wastes its turn dashing on up to us, which just gives us a perfect repelling blast right into our daggers yet again, and well, you know how that one goes. As we head deeper in, we stumble across a very big spider. That might take a bigger Eldritch Blast to squash. Yep, definitely gonna need to go at this one a little smarter. On our next attempt, we actually do manage to take out the matriarch, but while we're cleaning up the little ones, our curse kicks in and the web we were standing on just breaks and kills us for no real reason. So we decide to go at this a different way. Climbing back up to the village, we go chat with some ogres that we spotted earlier. We convince them that we're friends, and better yet, convince them to fight for us in exchange for gold that they'll never see. But let's be real, gold is just worth more when it's kept in the hands of noble folk anyways. With some bodyguards in tow, we head back down and summon them into the fight, but when the Spider Queen hits us, the curse kicks in and makes the ogres think it was us, which goes how you think it would. Okay, this time for real. We start with an invisible shovel attacking to surprise them, then we break the web the matriarch is standing on to deal a ton of damage, and to enter combat, blast one of the little spiders. To top things off, we summon the fellas to come help us out and earn their imaginary wage. The eagle-eyed Eight Eyes start sniping Gunter, summoning even more spiderlings, and also they immediately take out Shovel. In a couple rounds with a couple blasts, we manage to take out one of the spiders, and our temporary henchmen finally kick into gear to start dealing damage. Whenever we can, we shoot the web out from under the matriarch, while leaving the ogres to do their thing against anyone who comes near them. Just from shooting the webs, the queen gets pretty low, but we still have to heal up from the odd hits that we take here and there. At one point, the mama spider gets on our case, so to be extra safe, we down a potion of speed, disengage to run away, and heal up. This finally gets the ogres fighting the queen herself, and she in turn starts taking them out, which is exactly what we want. When the 2 remaining ogres and the matriarch are all low and grouped up, we throw a smoke powder bomb into the lot to deal with them all. I mean, they didn't really think they were worthy of our hard-earned gold, did they? Either way, one more blast on the remaining spider, and that's that solved. Our reward is a dark amethyst that we find on the ground. This lets us pop open and read the Necromancy of Thay, which, after passing some saving throws, gives us the Forbidden Knowledge permanent buff. This is just a +1 bonus to wisdom saves and checks, but hey, every bit counts, and we're not one to say no to Forbidden Knowledge. More importantly, with the help of a Featherfall scroll, we jump deep underground where every dwarf knows the really good stuff can be found. Instead of the really good stuff, though, we find a myconid colony, and though we're no fan of fungus, it's good enough for a safe spot down here. Well, here we meet Omeluum, who's intrigued by our situation and offers to help weaken the tadpole in our head if we go find some certain type of mushrooms from a nearby arcane tower. It's easy enough to find, but the security measures are turned on, so we need to head to the garden at the bottom and grab an anti-magic bloom that we pop into the generator to turn the lights on and the turrets off. Just upstairs, we find the ingredients we're looking for, but since we're here, we might as well keep looking for other goodies. We find all sorts of books and notes on our way up, and when we reach the top, a robot recites passages from them to us. Upon responding in kind, we're given a cool ring that lets us cast light and grants unimpeded access to the rest of the tower, where we also break this chair and grab its leg to acquire the Club of Hill Giant Strength. This club sets the wielder's strength to 19 so long as you're holding it, which is really nice for weaker folks like ourselves. We're not going to be using it quite just yet, but keep it in mind for later. As we return to Omeluum, he whips up the promised potion for us, though it ends up making the tadpole stronger than ever, which is a bit unfortunate. To make it up to us, he sells us some gear from his special inventory, such as the boots of Stormy Clamor. These reverberating runners make it so when we inflict a condition, we also inflict 2 turns of reverberation. For each turn a creature has, they take a -1 to all physical saves. Plus, if they reach 5 stacks, they take 1d4 thunder damage and have to make a DC 10 con save or fall prone. You might think these aren't great right now, but for whatever reason, each Eldritch Blast we fire counts as inflicting a condition. I don't know if it's because of the push or what, but I won't look a gift boot in the mouth. With an extra bit of power, we decide it's time to finally continue investigating this cult of the Absolute. As we're walking towards their camp, we get hit by a crazy mental attack from the Absolute itself and learn of her chosen champions. While we're rendered incapable of moving, this cool magical artifact with a peasant attached to it comes to rescue us. Unfortunately, she assumes that we need her help, so we tell her to bugger off, but she decides to stay put instead, so we move on. Once inside the camp, we meet a goblin in need of crushing called Crusher, who asks us to kiss his foot. We try and intimidate him in turn, which doesn't work, and a brawl breaks out instead. A single cloud of daggers is all it takes to get him to surrender, and to assert dominance, we just stand in the cloud and look down on him, in every sense of the phrase. Then he sulks off to be by himself, and we follow him to finish our revenge by blasting him to his death, which really annoys that peon from earlier. Ah well, no harm in taking out yet another nuisance. Since she won't be bothering anyone anymore, we grab her artifact and also loot Crusher to grab a ring called Crusher's Ring. Go figure. This is a pretty simple trinket that gives an extra 3 meters of move speed. It's not crazy, but when our base is 7.5, an extra 3 is very, very nice. Deeper inside the camp proper, we meet Minthara, a leader of this camp and a true soul of the Absolute. She makes it clear that she's struggling to find the Druid Grove, and a thought occurs to us. We figure if we ingratiate ourselves with her, we might have an in with the cult and access to their leaders. Instead of letting her raid the grove, though, we come up with a plot to deal with it for her as an extra favor. Before we enact it, we find an imprisoned Volothamp, a famous and well-connected wizard, so we pop open his cage to free him and ensure our noble name is carried far. He is quite well learned too, and offers his help, so we tell him to meet us at our camp where he can feel free to pick our brain. This gives us enough experience to hit level 4, granting us another cantrip in the form of Bone Chill, mainly to help us against enemies who have access to healing in the future. We also get to learn Hold Person, a really good spell for disabling an enemy and guaranteeing critical hits. It's also very nice when upcasted, which is wonderful for warlocks. And of course, we get to choose a feat. Since our goal is to circumvent our curse, what better way than getting Spell Sniper to expand our critical range and make our luck better whether it likes it or not. This feat also lets us get Shocking Grasp as an extra cantrip for those tough situations when we're in melee, especially against enemies wearing metal. Now it's time to enact our plan. We're back to the grove and right next to the idol where we cast Grant Flight in preparation, before yoinking the idol right from under them, which causes causes the druids to go into an uncontrollable rage and start murdering all the poor peons squatting in their grove. As the fight starts, Shovel stays behind to deal with the 5 or so druids here while we fly off to champion the common folk and make sure they don't die before we can make proper use of them. Most of this fight is spent with Gunther blasting away at whoever's got their back turned, while the two factions wail away on each other, with both sides taking losses while Shovel continues to 5v1 no problem. Eventually, the peons will get their butts kicked without our intervention, so we do have to actually spend spell slots if we want this grove to be as weak as possible by the end. This poor druid doesn't seem to realize they're winning, and they decide to end it all with an assist from our cloud of daggers. It's a doozy of a fight, and it takes quite a while. Plenty of druids get killed by Lord Goomley. Shovel lasts 8 whole rounds before she gets taken out, but eventually the last of our conscripted cronies go down with just a few druids left. All this means is we've got to spend our turns repelling the survivors away as we kite them backwards, which is made easier when Kaga drops a plant growth in between us and them, and then drops yet another one since I guess she must owe our family a favor. Either way, a well-placed magic missile scroll takes out the last of Kaga's dastardly druids, and with a whole lot of kiting we lure her up to the top of the gate where we blast her off to an early demise. Our efforts weren't just to weaken the camp, we also stole the idol so we could hand it to the tiefling kids for our promised reward, the Ring of Protection, which grants us an extra +1 to our AC and saving throws. Not the most complicated item, but it goes a long way towards boosting our survivability, and golly gee if it ain't worth adorning our noble hands. With the druids out of the way, we return to Minthara to tell her the good news, as well as the location of the grove so we can finish off the tieflings together. As we head to bed to give Minthi some time to get ready, we notice Volo seems to have vanished into thin air, so no reward for us, I guess. And to make things worse, we find we slept through the assault the next morning, though they don't seem to hold it against us. Oh well, we have a party in our honor to celebrate a job well done, and despite Volo showing up in the cutscene, he's still nowhere to be found in the real world, so it seems the curse got to him. Either way, Minthara gives us a cool little harp and tells us it will help us get to their headquarters in the Shadow-Cursed lands. Once the party is done, we set off towards the mountain pass in search of Gith that we heard were camping out here, and any powerful tools that they may have. Sure enough, we arrive inside their creche and speak to their quartermaster, Ajak Nirjira, who sells us the Knife of the Undermountain King. Most of the abilities of this weapon don't do much for us, but the expanded crit range sure does, meaning we now crit on an 18 or higher. And since it's a light weapon, we get to pair it alongside the Club of Hill Giant Strength that we got earlier, so anything strength related is a whole lot easier. To test out our newfound power, we head upstairs to go blast away on some kobolds. Admittedly, Cloud of Daggers does most of the work here, absolutely shredding away at every single enemy that runs through this little choke point. And once they're nice and low, all it takes is a couple fire arrows to blow up the very alcohol-dense kobolds. Further upstairs still, we find some Gramishkas to test our strength on. And we also start shooting with an offhand hand crossbow each turn since we're not doing anything else with our bonus action, though we don't have proficiency so it's pretty much useless. They do some weird stuff when spells are cast around them, like duplicating and full healing, so it takes quite a while, but we still get them all with relatively little headache. Since we're pretty close to level 5 afterwards, we head down to the Underdark where we stumble across a false god trying to pull one over on the simple-minded masses. After a successful persuasion check, we're able to make a devilish deal done dirt cheap, and all it costs is helping Buwal pull one over on the common folk, which we love doing anyways. In exchange, we get to level 5, and this is a big one. Our spell slots upgrade to 3rd level, and we learn Hunger of Hadar along with a free haste, call lightning, and animate dead from our pact boon once per long rest each. These are all really good spells, with haste and Hunger of Hadar in particular being pretty nutty for keeping enemies away while dealing good damage. But it gets better, because our proficiency bonus goes up to +3, making everything we do stronger, and all of our cantrips get improved, meaning Eldritch Blast fires 2 beams now. And to top it off, we get a 3rd Eldritch Invocation in the form of Devil's Sight, which lets us see through magical darkness, allowing us to attack enemies from safety. It doesn't get much better than this. Now we've really got to test our strength, so we get exploring and find out the nearby swamp has a massive illusion all over, which means there must be a powerful fae at work. And to the surprise of absolutely no one, in a mysterious hut nearby, an old crone is yelling at a captive younger girl named Mayrina. When Mayrina continues to be a nuisance, Auntie Ethel teleports her away, leaving us alone with just her. A fae like this is bound to have some powerful stuff hidden away, so we get investigating a hidden entrance in the fireplace, and when she spots us, a fight kicks off. Her nearby gnomish neighbors start joining the fight, and we send Shovel to go distract the horrendous hag. Since all the goons gotta make it through the doorway, we put a Hunger of Hadar right in their way. Unfortunately, right after, Shovel gets got, but our hunger works out perfectly, slowing them all down. The curse still hits our Eldritch Blast hard though, even with advantage. At the start of her next turn, Ethel skedaddles downstairs and leaves us us dealing with the red caps, which takes a lot longer than it ought to just because of how strong our family curse is. We even have to use our brand new haste, but our overwhelming amount of beams gets them all in the end. Continuing on, we head into the basement where Ethel tries to seduce us for our family money before vanishing in a puff of smoke. This has us rattled to our bones, so we head back upstairs and summon our zombie for the first time, as well as get Shovel back for emotional support. Then we spot some dirty hillbillies in her basement, and as Shovel is trying to get the drop on them, she unfortunately steps in a puddle and starts the fight early. Meanwhile, Gunter sneaks into position and uses darkness, followed up with some eldritch blasting. First blood in this brawl goes to Shovel, but soon after they get our zombie in return. All the while, we're blasting them away with our favorite cantrip. Since they're focused on our summons the whole time, it really isn't that challenging, and Shovel holds her own quite well, taking out another one before she gets got in return, leaving us to avenge her. Now that the way's clear, we feather fall down to the bottom, where we resummon Shovel, turn her invisible, turn ourselves invisible, hit the button to free Mayrina so we can use her as leverage to negotiate, and then cast darkness near where we think Ethel is. This really throws her for a loop, evidenced by the fact that instead of her usual chicanery, she just keeps trying to claw us while she's blind. Even when we get a good couple crits which push her out and frighten her, she'd still rather just skip her turn. And the next turn she just runs right back in and starts clawing away all over again. Which means we can just blast away over and over with the help of a speed pot to make things go faster. When she gets brought below 30 HP, she surrenders and offers us power in exchange for letting her leave with the girl. This is the most value the farm girl's life will ever have, so we'd be doing a disservice to her if we decline this deal. With the deal made, we get a permanent +1 to our charisma, bumping it up to 18 and improving our chance to hit, our damage, and our spell save DC. Speaking of power, we've heard there's more to be found in the Underdark, just across the lake, but there's Dwergar in the way, so we down a Bloodlust elixir and sneak up on them. As we get blasting on one next to an edge, the first two beams miss, and the next round our cantrip gets counterspelled, which makes this personal. The Dwergar dunces start running up the hill towards us, while their leader reanimates every corpse around, which naturally all come right at us. We have Shovel reveal herself behind them at this point to act as a distraction and slow them down, while we drop a Hunger of Hadar to do the same. On our next round, since some of them wandered out of the hunger, we use a Void Bulb to pull them all back in, and Shovel continues to wreak havoc, as well as eat enemy spells. Unfortunately, she gets done dirty and gets taken out off camera a moment later. Gunter keeps chucking Void Bulbs for now to keep the enemies all tangled up in the hunger, while we make some distance so they don't step out and immediately run us down. But while this is going on, we notice the enemies are saving on our spells quite a lot, so we take a look, and for whatever reason, our DC is 12 when it should be 15. Seems our curse got to our other spells too. Still, I don't really know what to say about this other than I hope it fixes itself, because it makes using any spell with a DC much harder to justify. Regardless, we keep blasting at whoever's closest, and our Bloodlust elixir triggers on the zombies, even when their undead fortitude keeps them standing, so we get a blast again. With the amount of distance we have on them at this point, it's not hard to keep the scarier enemies at bay, but their leader does get an insane 35-meter counterspell at one point, which is almost twice as far as the actual range of the spell, so good for him. Either way, we keep kiting, even dropping another Hunger of Hadar when the enemies start to catch up, which ends up taking out all the remaining zombies. And then we end up moving just a tad too far, causing initiative to break, giving the Devilish Dwergar a chance to full heal right before we aggro them again. They're not nearly as scary without their backup though, and at one point we even managed to trigger a Frighten and a Reverberation prone on the same turn, which forces the enemy to skip their turn, since they can't do anything without standing up, and they can't stand up since they can't move, leaving them ripe to be picked off the next round. Eventually, the leader catches up with us too, and with a gnarly Thorn Whip we yank him into the Great Void. All we need to do after that is take care of his buddy that he reanimated, and the fight is done. With them out of the way, we hop onto their boat and get sailing across the lake, where we're set upon by some other Dwergar who don't quite believe our lies. But they do a great impression of a boppet, so we get pushing and yanking, and maybe even a bit of pulling to send them all to a watery grave. Before we continue on, we double back to the beach to loot their bodies that have washed up on the shore, where we get the Bow of the Banshee. This +1 short bow makes it so as long as we're holding it, we have a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls against frightened creatures. I know it says a whole lot more than that, but that's the only bit that actually works with Eldritch Blast. We don't frighten enemies a ton right now, but once it starts to be more of a regular thing, the d4 bonus to hits will be quite nice. Upon arriving across the lake, we end up in Grimforge, where tensions are high between the Dwergar and the absolute cultists that they find themselves working for, especially so since their leader, Nier, is stuck in a cave-in. So we come up with an idea. We convince the simple-minded goons to rally against Nier, and then we'll take Nier's side so we can gain the favor of the higher-ups. All we need to do is take out the scrying eye nearby, then we pop open the rubble that was blocking the way. The big man comes stumbling out, immediately blaming the slaves, as he should, and then the fight starts with us, as planned, on the side of Nier. It's a little chaotic at first, but we get some good hits in. Unfortunately, our enemies do too. They even end up taking first blood, but our our side isn't too far behind in avenging them. Gunter blasts away, and we do our best to take out the easily influenced Dwergar, but alas, Nier is pretty insistent on getting hit by every single attack and gets killed after just a few rounds. When things start to look dire, we cast Darkness on ourselves, and it's a good thing too since our last ally gets got with a throw a moment later. So we send Shovel on distraction duty while we do our best to hit pretty much any attack. Our distraction does not last long, but it doesn't rage us when she falls. After all, only we're allowed to beat up our servants. This causes the crits to start pouring in, keeping the enemies unable to do anything as we pick them off one by one. With just one left, we use Hunger of Adar to really bully them, and as they fumble about trying to get out, that's the last of them dealt with. Except for this man, who I've never seen before in my life, but shows up to tell us about how Nier is dead before sprinting into a poison-filled room at Mach 10. Well, our plan didn't work, but continuing on, we tell the Myconids the Dwergar are dead, and they reward us with Bliss Spores, which grant an extra 1d6 to all of our rolls until our next long rest. And we also use an Elixir of Heroism to grant a d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws, which we'll need for what's to come. Like fighting some sentient armor who are guarding something that we really want. They fail to do anything meaningful to us as they get pushed off cliffs by a repelling blast and also get quite easily kited around the place until they're all gone, letting us pick up both the Scale Mail mold and the piece of mithril ore that we'll be using at the titular Grimforge itself. Gunter pops in the ore, and then the mold lowers the platform, puts on Nier's boots which will let us use a Misty Step for free, down a potion of glorious vaulting, and cast Mirror Image before spinning the lava valve, which causes the titanic guardian construct of the forge Grim to come sauntering on out, ready to rumble our day. We start by jumping directly across the way so that the clobbering construct follows us and stops right on the anvil in the center, perfect for an invisible shovel to pull the lever and crush the reeling robot, dealing about a third of its health as damage. This does summon a bunch of magma methods, but we've got a scroll of ice storm for just this occasion, instantly dealing with all of them. On our next round, we try and hop on back to the start, and the auto-pathing decides to dip us into the lava. So we've got to spend our action throwing a potion to heal up, and then we jump to the other side. Meanwhile, Shovel pulls another MVP distraction play, baiting out a crit hit, and making it so Grim walks right back onto the perfect hammering position, which we trigger with an Eldritch Blast. While the angry automaton is getting back up, we cast Hunger of Adar right in the center so the difficult terrain slows it down. Then, next turn, we jump across the way to lure it into position yet again. Our plan works, but it also gets a killer stomp off, breaking our concentration and dealing heavy damage. Despite Gunter reeling from a concussion, we still get up and blast the lever once more, barely not killing Grim. Funny thing though, when it stands back up, it's in just the right spot to get superheated while still being on the anvil, and hey, I'm not one to look a gift Grim in the mouth. As a reward, we get a hard-won adamantine scale mail, 16 AC medium armor that reduces all damage by 1, gives disadvantage on stealth checks, immunity to crit hits, and when an attack hits us, they get sent reeling for 2 turns. For each turn of reeling that they have, they get a -1 to attack rolls, making them less likely to hit us. This is a pretty nice boost to our survivability, but it won't be our permanent armor. There's just one last thing we've got to do now before we can move on to the Shadowcurse lands. Time to figure out what the Gith and the Kreshno. Turns out they're really interested in that artifact the girl we murked earlier was carrying, so we use it to negotiate passage to their leader, who is significantly less interested in cutting a deal with us as everyone else has been so far, and while we're trying to work something out, his false god Lich Queen shows up. She asks us to go inside the artifact and kill whoever's inside, and since our patron warned us to be cautious, we agree, though we're not happy about it. When we arrive inside, we find the man of our dreams. Literally, they've been talking to us in our sleep, giving us advice and warning. Since they seem to mean no immediate harm to us, and they're clearly okay with letting us be in charge, we decide to let them live. Not to mention, they also claim to be what's protecting us from turning into an enemy mind flayer. So they send us on our way to face the Gith outside, with a temporary bless, a scroll of false life for 7 temp HP, and a bloodlust elixir. And of course, alongside Shovel, plus a reanimated Gith corpse that we found laying around here. We step outside and the final showdown begins. The crossbowman that goes before us misses their tripping attack thankfully, and Shovel gets a nice sneaky hit on one of the Ardents. On our turn, we use a potion of speed, alongside not 1, but 2 casts of Eldritch Blast to finish that one off and trigger our elixir, letting us run past the remaining Gith and with our last action cast Darkness so they focus on our hired help. The big boss man buffs up on his turn, while the remaining Ardent takes out Shovel and one of the swordsmen instantly murks our zombie. Next round, we're able to finish off another Gith with 2 casts of our favorite cantrip, but the reverberation kills them, which doesn't trigger our bloodlust. We're pretty far from the enemies though, so they spend their turns just dashing on up to reach us, leaving them open for some beautiful crits, which frighten all but their leader. However, this is our last turn of speed pot, so we also spend our bonus action refreshing it. Strangely enough, when our turn ends, even the leader refuses to do anything. I had heard darkness can break enemy AI like this, and it's not something I want to make a habit out of, but we'll use it to our advantage at least this once. We again fire up the Gatling gun, and with our advantage attacking from darkness, we get crits galore, taking out one more Gith and frightening the leader. The Inquisitor is unable to do a darn thing due to his rightful fear of Gunther, while the remaining Gith goon dashes up to us. Which is their last mistake, as they get blasted down, and over the course of the next couple rounds, we give the same treatment to their poor solitary boss. Now that they're all dealt with, we saunter away and get out of dodge, before the rest of the crush rains down on us, heading to Grim Forge where we spotted an entrance to the Shadowcurse lands. As our gallant adventurer continues on, we arrive in the Shadowcurse lands, and it's surprisingly a wee bit dark here. So we pop on a ring we got earlier that lets us cast a light to make sure nothing foul sneaks up on us while we're unaware. In fact, we end up sneaking up on something foul ourselves, the common folk. While we're chatting to each other, a sentient shadow gets the jump on one of them, and for better or worse, a fight kicks off with them on our side. We're up first, and we've still got our Bless and Bloodlust elixir from the last act active, so we're feeling pretty good as we get blasting on the nearest shadow. The rest of the round goes by with our temporary meat shields trading blows with the shadow monsters. And when it gets back to us, we show off our haste spell as well as our ability to get crits galore, both misses and hits. Thankfully, first blood goes to Team Goomley as one of the Harpers takes out a shadow. On our next turn, we fire up the Gatling gun. Our first blast doesn't kill anyone. Our second blast, however, does, triggering our elixir, which lets us get one more as well. Though our bodyguards aren't doing nearly as well as we are, as the first of them falls. Either way, Gunther's life is certainly worth more, evidenced by the fact that we take out not one but two of the three remaining shadows when we get the chance, causing the remaining one to strike back with vengeance-fueled strength that takes out half our health in one fell swoop. Still, we manage to get the reanimated Harper, though he dies to reverberation, so no elixir proc for us. And to keep ourselves humble and the fight nail-biting, our curse gives us one more crit miss on the remaining shadowy specter. However, there's no need to be nervous as it misses us, and we take it out easy peasy in return. The Harpers are sufficiently amazed by our noble bearing and mark our map with a safe location, and even if it's a peasant-filled pigsty, until we can find Moonrise, it's as good a place as any. Sure enough, right down the road is the place we're looking for, and even with the peon we've saved vouching for us, yet another dirty druid bars our path. She thinks we're with the Cult of the Absolute just because of a parasite in our head. But before things get too out of hand, Flaming Fist Marcus shows up to vouch for us as well. He's an actual true soul who thinks we're one as well, so we play along with what he says, and Jaheira is more than convinced by him, granting us free reign at a last light in. Which means we head straight towards Quartermaster Tally and buy the Cloak of Protection. This will be our forever cloak, granting a +1 to both AC and saving throws. Honestly, it's really hard to beat how good this is despite its simple effect. The extra power-up is definitely nice, but we're gonna take these people for all they're worth. And before we can do that, we gather as much info as we can from Jaheira, learning that Moonrise is nice nearby and is being ruled by an immortal man named Ketheric Thorm, a leader of the cult and a man our patron wants gone. As we're heading out, we also get told about Isabel, a cleric upstairs who can give us a blessing to help with the shadow curse, though with Marcus hanging around, we'll hold off on that for now since we're sure he's got some sort of plot in mind. Instead, we head off to find some valuables where they're always found, underground. There's quite the meanlock infestation waiting for us down here, so we send an invisible shovel in to get the jump on them. While she's keeping them distracted, we drop a Hunger of Adar at a bottleneck and start blasting the closest one, instantly frightening them too. Unfortunately, our Quasit servant goes down right after, but she's served her purpose. And despite being able to teleport, the meanlocks seem to much prefer walking through the Hunger, which is definitely to our benefit. While most of the myriad meanlocks tend to meander about on their turns, one of them actually does teleport outside the Hunger, which means we know exactly who to target on this turn, and since we've got advantage due to their blindness, the crits are rolling in. We also down a speed pod to finish off the first of them, triggering our elixir and letting us blast away even more. So long as we keep this up, there's really not much any of them can do. They can barely even move due to difficult terrain and being frightened. In fact, this whole fight kinda just turns into shooting fish in a barrel, as not one of them manages to stay out of the Hunger, and with no range attacks, they go down without landing a single hit on us. Our reward for this extermination is the Covert Cowl, a helmet that expands our crit range by a further one so long as we're obscured. That means in dim light or darkness. Since both of those are plentiful in Act 2, we'll have no problem keeping this active once we don't need light to resist the shadow curse. It also gives a +1 at dex saves as a treat. With a bit more power in tow, we set off towards Moonrise, alongside a group of willing meat shields who say they've tracked down a cultist convoy that has a way of resisting the shadow curse. And along the way, just for exploring, we get enough experience for level 6. This gives us our next subclass feature, Entropic Ward, a reaction that once per short rest lets us impose disadvantage on an attack against us, and if it misses, we gain advantage on our next attack against that creature. It's not great, but there's nothing wrong with having it. We also get to grab another spell learned in the form of Counterspell, an iconic spell that lets us do exactly as the name suggests. It's not guaranteed against higher level spells, but if we're going to be using spell slots on things other than Hunger of Adar or Darkness, it needs to be impactful, and this one can be a lifesaver. Continuing on, we find the convoy easily enough, being led by a mad, muttering Drider. Since we're trying to get in with the people at Moonrise, we make ourselves known and let the Drider know that there's an ambush about to befall him. Naturally, the Harpers don't take too kindly to that. It is rather refreshing for Gunther to get back to his roots of mowing down the lower classes while making friends with people in positions of power. Once all is said and done, which doesn't take too long, we convince the Drider we're buddies, and he tells us to stay close to his lantern as that's the source of their immunity to the curse, which means that we want that lantern to ourselves. There's no more option to convince him to just hand it over, unfortunately, but that kind of power is definitely better in our hands, so we convince our new pal the old-fashioned way. Our 8-legged opponent zooms over through the Hunger, almost making it out in one go. Gunther goes right after, and we try and take out one of the low-health cronies to trigger our elixir, but we barely don't get there, though he does die from the Hunger on his turn. Strangely enough, the Drider just skips their turn entirely, presumably because they're getting blocked. But this gives us the opportunity to continue blasting folks backwards while we keep our distance. One of them manages to dash pretty far out on their next turn before realizing they're far too impoverished to be near us and jumping back into the Hunger while continuing to body block the Drider. We manage to murk one of them and frighten Karnas in the process, allowing us to blast yet again, and with another crit, frighten another enemy. The next turn goes incredibly similarly, taking out another garish goon and continuing to bully our betrayed bud even further. With the turn after that, Gunther manages to obliterate the last of the small fry, and we spend the next 5 or so turns just blasting the Drider back as it struggles to get out of our spell. Until eventually the Hunger wears out, causing the arachnid cultist to come barreling towards us. Unfortunately, the family curse really starts kicking in at this point with a few blasts crit missing, but as long as we keep our health at max, this creature can only attack once per turn, which means even if it's narrow, we can avoid getting destroyed. Especially so once we start getting shoves on Karnas to avoid disadvantage on repelling blasts that push him even further, letting us run far enough away that he has to spend his turns dashing to catch up. And since now he's at low health, we bring in a Call Lightning to guarantee the kill. Or not. Okay, now we guarantee the kill. Well, it sucks we won't get extra clout with the Moonrise people, but at least we don't have to deal with those Harpers anymore. We grab the Moon Lantern laying on the ground and find there's a pixie fueling it, so we cut a deal with her to gain immunity to the curse in exchange for her freedom. A more than worthwhile trade since it means we won't have to hear her whining and our new cowl will be working dandy. Now that we've got a safe way to get there, it's really not hard to just march down the road and arrive at the place to be. Whereupon we enter the main hall and find Minthara awaiting judgment for her failures in Act 1. She has her say and rolls a nat 1 on her persuasion check to convince them to let her live, and so Ketheric Thorm himself passes a harsh but fair judgment. Doubly so for the goblins. And he takes the chance to really assert his dominance when they fail to kill the immortal man to no one's surprise, before he heads upstairs to delegate like any man in charge should, and we get to roam the towers free. Our first stop is Raj Obladra to buy the risky ring. This will be replacing Crusher's ring but grants advantage on all attack rolls as well as disadvantage on all saving throws. Obviously, this is a big trade-off where we lose defense for offense, but with perma advantage, the crits will come rolling in, and so will the Frightens. Then we go upstairs to have a quick little palaver with Zarel, Ketheric's prime delegator. She lets us know there's a job for us, and though we hate doing people's dirty work, it's all for our patron in the end. Apparently, Balthazar, the resident necromancer, has gone AWOL somewhere in the nearby mausoleum looking for an important relic, and we're to go after him. There's a chance this relic could be Ketheric's weakness, so we oblige for now. Elsewhere in the tower, we go snooping for anything we can use against these people and stumble across a mimic in a dilapidated bedroom. After clearing it out, we grab the Spine Shutter amulet from his body. This amulet makes it so whenever we deal damage with a ranged spell attack such as Eldritch Blast, we'll inflict 2 turns of a reverberation as well, increasing the amount we apply this by a ton, making it much more likely enemies will fall prone. And our snooping pays off as we find Ketheric's bedroom with a heartwarming note from his dead wife, a big mistake having emotional attachments, one that we'll be sure to take advantage of. During our investigating, we find a strange hole in the wall and naturally we stick our hand in it. As a result, due to our capabilities as a warlock, we're pulled into a vision by the Absolute itself. It communicates to us that it is but a slave to those in charge who are controlling it, and we are the only one who can stop them. Now, we know enough to not want to free the Absolute from their control, but it's nice to know how dangerous we are. Before too long though, the vision ends and we have to be satisfied with the few answers that we did get. Once all is said and done, we head back to the Last Light Inn where Marcus awaits us so that we can jump Isabel and take her back to her father, Ketheric Thorm. So we go say hi to her, and she gives us a blessing that grants resistance to magical necrotic damage, which is a very nice thing to do right before we decide to kidnap her. And it's really not hard for us to bring her nice and low, then knock her out with a critical whack to the face. Marcus picks her up and flies away, leaving both Gunter and Jaheira awkwardly stuck in a last light inn that's about to get flooded by shadow-cursed undead. As we're worried about how we'll deal with her, she dies in one single arrow shot on the very first turn of combat, which is very indicative of how fights with her usually go. Now it's time for our favorite little game, standing on the balcony and mowing down peasants by the dozen. In fact, they don't even really try to do anything about it, past just cowering inside of the building. To make things a little more interesting, we show them where the stairs are and then cover them all with a Hunger of Hadar, and then get right back to reaping them like wheat. Before you know it, the last of them goes down and our fun is over, leaving just some boring old plants to finish off. Ah well, there's always more peasants. At least we're now the brand new owner of a beautiful waterside inn. Speaking of owning parts of the town, we set off to claim ownership of the rest of it too, starting with the toll house, where we meet Garen Jothi Thorm. Regardless of how we pronounce her name, using our incredible negotiation skills, we convinced her that there's a new head honcho in town and she should really just hand over the toll house. She happily obliges and blows herself up, letting us get all the gold our little rotten heart desires. Next on our list of places to acquire is the House of Healing. Unfortunately, the good Dr. Malus Thorm is in the middle of an operation when we arrive. We do our best to convince him to hand over his house, but alas, we fall a little short of the mark and a fight ends up breaking out. Before we can do anything, the doctor whacks us, but we go right after with a Hunger of Hadar in the center of the room and then climb out of his reach, forcing him to go all the way around if he wants to get us. The malicious medical staff all kinda get stuck in the hunger and just skip through their turns, letting us rain carnage down from on high at whoever we can see. Eventually, when it's just one nurse and Malice left, they finally figure it's about time to walk out and chase us down. And then they almost immediately go back on said decision and waste their turns dashing back into horrible places, letting us get the nurse real low so Shovel can come in and finish her off. Meanwhile, the doctor reses a different nurse at the far end of our hunger, and with our elixir of bloodlust we can take her out while still damaging the doctor. This keeps happening over and over, leaving Malice in a perpetual loop where we blast and blast away all 358 of his hit points. Just like that, Gunter becomes the proprietor of yet another blossoming business to be. There's one last place on our list to acquire, the local pub, where surprise surprise yet another Thorm, Thisbald, awaits us. He pours us a foul brew while we discuss him handing over the business to someone more capable, but when we try to fake drinking it, things go south fast, and yet another fight kicks off. Our first turn is spent with an Eldritch Blast on the nearest foe, while we make as much distance as we can. Unfortunately, the baddies manage to close the gap on their turn, so we're left using another hunger to slow him down and let us walk away without provoking any attacks, while Shovel makes herself known to bar the path for anyone who would get to her master. With her on defense, we get blasting Thisbald himself and get heading towards the exit doorway. The zombie patrons get the best of our boorish bodyguard at this point, but she held the line long enough, especially considering we drop another hunger on the coming turns to keep damaging and kiting the enemies. After a few more turns, we're all outside and we've started picking off the goons one by one, while backpedaling further into the street each turn. As we're doing this though, it gets to the point where Thisbald just kinda stops. Apparently he can't walk past this point, though that's not really the most involved way to take on this fight, so we take out the last zombie, cast haste on ourselves, and then run back into Thisbald's territory. Unfortunately, we don't move far enough and he gets a nasty regurgitation, but despite our disadvantage, we make the concentration save, which means for the rest of the fight, we get to run circles around him while we spam Eldritch Blast out the wazoo. And in 6 or so rounds, that is the last of our business negotiations done for. Time to triple the price on everything. Speaking of expensive deals, we head to the mausoleum and find Raphael waiting outside in typical condescending fashion. He tries to persuade us to reconsider him becoming our patron by letting us know about a devil that lurks below, one that he really wants dead. The knowledge is good to have, but we don't need anyone who talks down to us in our corner, so we tell him to bugger off and we enter the mausoleum, wherein we find a secret entrance to a Sharan gauntlet by pressing just a few buttons. Upon descending below, we find yet another button-themed puzzle. This one is as simple as approaching from the east and then the south to avoid a couple magical barriers. This lets us continue on to a side passage where we obliterate a cloaker that was lying rather poorly in wait. In the next room after that, we see some sentient skeletons shambling about, so we make sure to pre-buff ourselves with a haste in case something goes awry. Though it seems we were needlessly worried, at least at first, since these are Balthazar's puppets. As we're in the middle of telling him we were sent to help, the room starts shaking and portals start opening, bringing out shadowy undead dark justiciars. Since we went around the side passage, there's a few skeletons that join from the the main passage while we get started on taking out the portals with the help of haste and a bonus action stab. Our short, shrill servant also gets on the case. The Dark Justiciars spend their turns mainly just fighting against the skeletons, and the skeletons vice versa. Unfortunately, more and more umbral tremors appear faster than we can take them out, but it won't stop us from trying, though it is annoying since they can't be crit. To make matters worse, Balthazar's unimpressive undead start to lose the fight at this point as well, and we keep doing our best to take out at least 2 of the tremors each turn before we run out of fodder. A big one spawns in the center next round, and really not wanting to find out what's going to come out of that, we devote all firepower towards taking it out. This routine keeps up for a little while until eventually Shovel is taken out before she's able to take out the portal that she's been working on, which means it actually expires and summons one last Dark Justiciar, making our final initiative order look like this. With a Bloodlust Elixir and haste active, the Gatling gun gets fired up and is fueled with eldritch energy and righteous rage at the mistreatment of our servant. But soon after, the last of our bodyguards lay broken on the ground. So to play it safe on our next turn, after a bit of blasting, we run as far away as we can and then break concentration on haste, instantly ending our turn but making it so we don't have to skip our next one. Also making it so we're less worried when the enemy squad mobilizes and starts landing hits, since we have no concentration to worry about. To buy us another turn, we misty step away using a scroll and shut the door so they can't fire on us without opening it first. Basically meaning they all spend their turns dashing on up to us. Relying on the age-old hunger of Adar to keep them at bay, we pass the turn back to them, where Gunter quickly realizes that they can't be blinded, resulting in a broken concentration awfully quick. On our next round, we start thinning them down and granting disadvantage in a much more frightening way before healing up with a potion. Thanks to this, they miss much more often, making us feel a whole lot safer. Though they still land the occasional hit as the fight goes on, but it's nothing our potion supply can't get us through. From here, we just pick them off one by one until they're all dealt with and the cowardly Balthazar pops open the door. Inside, we meet the ne'er-do-well necromancer face to face, and he tells us all about how the relic does indeed bestow Ketheric his invulnerability, confirming our suspicions. We tell him if we're gonna be doing his job for him, he's gonna have to give us some help. He obliges by handing us a bell to summon Flesh, his not-so-little brother. And with that, we set out to the first of Shar's trials that await us, the Soft Step trial. All we need to do is get to the end without being spotted, so we turn on turn-based mode and jump through this window. Then we lockpick the door at the end, and just like that, the first Umbral gem is ours. The next one is the Self-Same trial, wherein we'll fight a clone of ourselves, complete with all of our spells and gear, so naturally we start by taking off said gear. Once inside and our gear's back on, we find a very vulnerable looking Gunter that we sneak up on and get blasting. As you can imagine, he does not last too long at all, and that's Umbral gem number 2 in the bag. Downstairs is the final trial, the Faith Leap trial. This one is easy enough, we just need to get to the end using an invisible pathway, or better yet, hopping our way across that invisible pathway. Making sure to touch down on it before hopping to the end, otherwise we get teleported back to the start. And as easy as taking candy from a commoner, we get our last trial done. While we're here though, we notice a library filled with more Justiciars nearby, and even with the librarian in the center making the whole room silenced, we can still shoot from outside. Strangely enough, this doesn't trigger aggro, and we're able to take one of them out from here, but there's no fun in doing that to all of them, so we send in Shovel to surprise them and start combat. The librarians start spawning in even more Justiciars, which is a little worrisome, but we focus on taking out the ones that we can to trigger our elixir and let us deal even more damage. Even with perma advantage, we can't stop the Goomly curse from causing the occasional crit miss that prevents kills. But after spawning 2 more Justiciars, the librarian vanishes completely, so at least we don't have to worry too much. From here, it plays out pretty similarly to the last fight, with the same enemies unable to deal enough damage to make us really worry, so we just keep them at bay and blast them down one by one till the library is ours to claim, including its content, such as this little book here, and after pressing this button in the northwest corner, we gain access to the locked section, where we put the book we found, opening up yet another hidden area, and it's here we grab the Dark Justiciar helmet and half plate. The helmet grants the same crit expanding feature as the cowl, but gives +1 to con instead of dex, which is a much nicer boost, and to top it off, it also gives a +1 to all saves against spells. The half plate, on the other hand, is something we won't even really be using for the most part, with the exception of one very important fight later on thanks to its advantage on con saves, so keep it in mind. Now that we've got a little boost and the trial's done, we investigate the other side of the gauntlet where we run across Yrgir, an Orthon and the devil Raphael had warned us of. Upon him realizing we're no friend of Raphael, we convince him to sing us his contract, as we're an expert in the matter. We cut a deal with him afterwards. We'll make sure his contract is fulfilled if he gives us the last Umbral gem that we need. Now we've just got to find the last living Justiciar that is no doubt hiding somewhere in this mausoleum. Our big break comes in the form of the rats in this place, who are more than they appear, since they together are the last Justiciar. Justiciar. So we start a fight against all of them. To make sure the rats have something enticing to go after, we summon the world's greatest meat shield and start picking them off one by one. It takes quite a while, but as quick as you can say anti-disestablishmentarianism, Flesh has taken out the last rat and we repay him by granting him a nice extended rest. Once they're all dealt with, the rat man is reborn as less rat and more man, and one more little segment to this fight takes place. The poor rambunctious rodent does his best to get us with a couple hits, to no avail, but we certainly don't fail hitting him in turn, sending him down to take loads of fall damage. Next turn he does get a very scary blight on us, but we just repeat blasting him off the edge, and that's Yrgir's contract fulfilled. With that fight done, we also get level 7, upgrading our spell slots to level 4 and letting us choose Misty Step as a new addition. It's a nice bonus action mobility spell that, much like Counterspell, is more or less a last resort, when used with a Warlock spell slot at least. We also get Book of Ancient Secrets as an Eldritch Invocation, letting us use Ray of Sickness, Chromatic Orb, and Silence once per long rest for free. These aren't really incredible spells, but most of the invocations we can get at this level aren't worth much at all, so we'll take what we can. Now it's time for us to return to Yrgir and tell him the good news, but the celebration is short-lived as Raphael shows up to be a Debbie Downer. He lets Yrgir know he's in violation of contract since he himself wasn't the one to do the job, so Raphael whisks him away to his domain to do whatever he wants with him, letting us grab the very last Umbral gem that we need. Since there's not much left for us to do before we reveal our betrayal to Ketheric and end his immortality, we get purging all the many squatters in our new town, starting with the fishfolk. Not to mention the odd roaming shadow in ooze pits, and of course the avian population needs a good culling, and who can forget a bit of landscaping to really spruce things up. With all that out of the way, it's time to properly prepare for the end, starting by heading to the center of town and hitting the northern, then western, and finally eastern plaques on the statue, opening a hidden entrance. Once inside, there's 3 corresponding saves to make with each mental stat, and as we succeed we get a temporary +5 to each until our next long rest. This is especially nice for our charisma, making our chance to hit and damage significantly better. Then we head back to the gauntlet and pop in all the Umbral gems we acquired to unlock the last door, revealing inside a portal to the Shadowfell that we descend into the depths of, trepidatious but ready for whatever dangers lie within. As we awaken, we get a glimpse of an incredible prison holding a lone figure called the Night Song at the bottom. But we're not the only people who've made it inside. Balthazar is still here and hurries down towards the bottom before us. We'll have to take him out before he gets the chance to do anything funny. So when we're at the bottom, we sneak up on him and steal the shiny speed potion sticking out of his pocket. Then we start the fight. He immediately kicks off by casting Animate Dead on so many corpses, but it's nothing the world's greatest counterspell can't handle. A couple turns later, Balthi jumps to an awfully precarious position on a floating rock, which we just can't help but take advantage of, and just like that, Ketheric's right-hand corpse is dealt with. Then we chat with the Night Song, and she very haughtily talks about how she'll forgive us if we let her go. Unfortunately, we really don't have much of a choice. So as we lay a hand on her shoulder, the Night Song is freed and reborn once again as Dame Aelin, the demigod daughter of Selûne. And just as soon as she's free, she's off to Moonrise to unleash her divine displeasure upon them all. Gunter shows up right behind her, and the Moonrise folks seem actually surprised that we betrayed them after they spent all that time belittling and demeaning us. And like that, it's Gunter and Shovel versus all of Moonrise. We start our first turn by casting Hunger of Hadar in the narrow stairway that they'll need to get out of if they want to reach us. The enemy's turns are all spent just dashing into our spell, with some other questionable choices being made too, like a Cone of Cold being cast nowhere and this dude jumping to his certain death. When it's back to us, an Eldritch Blast almost gets casted, but a blinded Zarel decides to counterspell it. It's at this point we send in Shovel to slow him down a little while we backpedal out the door. Our loyal servant gets quickly brutalized with a black hole into a crit hit right after, but at least she lasted 3 whole turns. To make matters worse, one of the archers barely hits us and we lose concentration. So we run out of the hall and use our second spell slot on a second hunger. Hadar is a hungry boy after all. As they struggle to get through, we finally start picking him off with blasts, which trigger our Bloodlust elixir and let us further damage whatever folks are foolish enough to be at the front of the pack. Some of these cultist cronies even died of the hunger itself on their way out. Even once they manage to get out of the harrowing hunger, there's little they can do to catch up to us thanks to our repelling blasts and frightens, meaning we just keep walking backwards and keep shooting away. Only problem is, once we get them into the Shadow Curse, when they die, they come back as undead, though admittedly much less threatening undead. Just a few more rounds of this, with the Shadow Curse taking away their health as well, and they're all cleaned up easy peasy. There's some more folks waiting for us when we get back, but with a surprise round from Shovel and with our resources refreshed, we're really not too worried. Our usual strat of keeping them at bay works out pretty well, and at one point one of them cast their own hunger to make our job even easier. Sure enough, the job is wrapped up here in just a few rounds with them unable to do a darn darn thing. We continue on upstairs afterwards and find our good pal Marcus guarding the entry to Kethric's balcony, so we drop our fave AoE spell and wait a moment for them to figure out it wasn't the wind that did it. This fight plays out almost exactly the same as the last fight since there's a choke point for us to hold. All we need to do is take out the Gaunt Goons and then the head honchos. When we finally reach the top, we find a very irate Ketheric Thorm who is reeling with the fact that he is now very mortal. To add insult to injury, we exploit his weak little emotions by showing him the letter from his dead wife and convince him he should join her. Then Dame Aelin shows up to ruin the party and reignite Papa Thorm's fighting spirit, and so the rooftop showdown kicks off. The first attempt unfortunately goes pretty rough, but next go around we've got a better plan. We start by casting darkness on ourselves, since frankly there's just too many enemies to take hits from. Followed up with a speed potion fueled E-blast on the necromancer that summons yet more baddies, leaving everyone else to start wailing on Aelin, resulting in her taking a ton of damage, but she still lives long enough to miss Ketheric a couple times. The next round is pretty similar, with us focusing on the necromancer and Aelin actually going down. Don't worry, she'll be fine. Ketheric's hound does jump into our darkness and manage to land a hit, which is a little worrying, but our priority is still the same, and we even managed to finish off Sostera with our next blast. Now our new target is the dog, since his attacks deal quite a bit of damage and bone chill. Only problem is this is our last speed potion turn, so we throw another one at the ground to refresh, and it didn't work. I guess the darkness cancelled it out. Good to know. All this really means is we lose one turn, so to make sure the dog doesn't go for us, we get Shovel to take the hit, and still no one else dares to come in the darkness. A couple turns later, we take out the dog, and now we're feeling pretty safe to shoot the big Thorm and his necromites from the safety of our spell. That is, until Ketheric jumps in and clobbers our sorry butts, though at least we've got a backup spell slot for just this occasion. Still, this has us a little shaken, so we start thinning down the horde in case that happens again. Only to make a complete rookie mistake one turn by bonus action attacking him and getting knocked prone by a shield bash, breaking our concentration. We somehow survive to the next round where we scramble out of the way and cast a scroll of black tentacles to deal some AoE damage. In response, Deadly Orders gets used on us, which grants everyone advantage on hitting us and ends up with yet more broken concentration. The spell did its job well though, bringing them low enough that we can take out 4 of them with just 2 casts of the best cantrip before doing our best to heal. Ketheric does summon more necromites as well, but for whatever reason whenever they hatch they don't actually join initiative. So we spend a couple more turns taking out the 2 that remain in the fight before laying it heavy on the big guy himself, while engaging in kiting tactics. Aelin proves herself a useful servant by being the best at distracting since she gets up for free each turn. It takes quite a while, but eventually we do get him low, and with the help of a big old tentacle, he recaptures the Night Song and teleports away. Well, I guess we just kind of watch. At this point, the rest of the necromites kick into gear, so we spend a few rounds taking them all out too, which isn't very hard since by themselves they're not much to worry about. And we quickly zoom after Ketheric into a big old hole that leads into an underground illithid colony, presumably where the Elder Brain our patron is seeking resides. There's plenty of intellective hours lurking around that all give a bunch of XP, letting us hit level 8 right after entering. After a bit of deliberation, we wind up taking Fear for the spell we gain at this level. It's another concentration spell, but it can be a game changer in fights if used right, so here's hoping we get the chance in the future. We also gain another feat for which we take an ability score improvement, bumping our charisma up to 20 with the +1 from Ethel way back in Act 1. Before we chase down our weak-willed foe, there's something else in the colony that catches our eye, so we down a potion of invis to sneak past the many enemies and jump over to it. It turns out to be a puzzle, one that Gunther has no problem solving with his superior upper-class brain and higher education. Upon being solved, our reward is a brain in a jar that we can pop into a console at a different part of the room and actually speak to. And if we can speak with it, we can make a deal with it. It wants to be purged, and in return we get its memories along with a very special technique. The Githzerai Mind Barrier, a little permanent buff that grants advantage on all intelligence saves for the rest of the run. No complaints from me on this one, we're definitely happy to have it. Now it's time for us to descend into the depths to finally face the true leaders of this cult. As we arrive at the bottom, we find Ketheric talking to Lord Enver Gordhash, a fellow notable noble, and Orin, a clear bloodthirsty ballspawn. Tensions are clearly high between the 3 of them, but together with their nether stones they're able to control the very elder brain that we've been looking to stop. After a brief talk and a bit of showboating, all but Ketheric disappear in a puff of smoke to head towards Baldur's Gate. Once they're gone, we have a chat with the big man ourselves and take the opportunity to remind him yet again of his dead wife, really twisting that dagger where it hurts. He takes it very personally and ends up sacrificing himself to the big old pit in the center, and who should come crawling out but someone else who's taken this all very personally. The Apostle of Merkel, Lord of Bones, a god whose nobility, if we're being honest, is not nearly so great as our own. And thus the final showdown begins, and we really gave it a good few goes, but things kept going going awry, and it became clear for the strategy I had in mind at least, we just didn't have enough speed potions. So we went back to an older save and faced the real final boss of this act. 45 minutes of uninterrupted partial resting and then shopping, and then partial resting and more shopping. Our concentration waned and our courage faltered, but by the end our great trial had been conquered and we had a bag full of all the resources we could need. As a bit of extra prep, we also go to the Sharon statue in the gauntlet that we forgot last time, where we gain a buff that grants full necrotic immunity until our next long rest. Then we go through all the various fights all over again in much the same way to get back to where we were. Once that's done, we get prepping for the fight decently similarly to how we did it the first time, starting with an elixir of heroism. Then we use Armor of Agathis since we can get the spell slot back anyways. And of course we summon our loyal Hound Scratch as well as a full humanoid zombie from a nearby Intellect Devourer. Don't question it. Gear-wise, we replace our Adamantine Armor with the Dark Justiciar Armor and Risky Ring with Crusher's Ring. When we're at the bottom, we gather our servants around and treat us all to a potion of flying, as well as a potion of invisibility, so we can get into position. Once we're all ready, we cast Darkness where Merkel will spawn, which doesn't break invis, then we bonus action stab the nearby Mind Flayer to get a surprise round. As the fight begins, we send Scratch to rescue Aelin, while we focus on the Mind Flayer since it can be absolutely deadly. Even our zombie gets in on the action, letting us down a potion of speed and finish off said Illithid on the next round, before laying into the Lord of Bones himself. Merkel spends his turns doing the only thing he can since he's blinded due to darkness, Call of the Damned, a map-wide AoE that hurts all the enemies too, calling them down, including Isabel, who is also here since Marcus kidnapped her. While the Necromites fail to hit us at all thanks to our high ground and higher AC. After a few rounds of blasting him and refreshing our potions whenever we need to, all the Necromites he's been summoning get Merkel's Call, meaning they'll start sacrificing themselves to heal the big boss, as well as let him cast Finger of Death. Darkness stops the finger, and a Bone Chill once per turn stops the healing, which is what we really needed the speed potions for. So as long as we stay on top of our darkness, as well as our health and our speed potions, we can feel free to use one action to Bone Chill and another one to blast away. This fight is essentially just a resource check for us, especially considering the unavoidable damage every turn. And unfortunately, it's one that we failed earlier, but now that we're more prepared, there's very little the Lord of Bones can do as we whittle him down. Now that's what a true Lord is capable of. Good riddance. Aelin shows up to double tap and make sure that Ketheric is gone for good this time. We grabbed another stone off of his armor to celebrate. And Aelin asks if she can join our camp in the future. We're not too keen on having her around since she seems the sentimental type, but hey, maybe we can sell her to somebody or something. Either way, with one pillar of the cult dealt with, our patron is appeased for now and our curse is weaker than ever, so we set out towards Baldur's Gate, where there will no doubt be plenty of dangers and poor people to deal with. Finally, out of the Shadow Curse lands, we find ourselves on the road to the titular city, taking it easy and contemplating what we'll do when we get there. When all of a sudden, some Gith midnight malefactors show up out of a portal to jump us while our dream visitor begs us for help. They go before us and we don't get much of a say while they beat the ever-loving bejesus out of us and we barely survive. Since we don't like dealing with the Gith on the best of days, Gunter simply misty steps away, then throws down a speed potion and dashes all the way to the exit portal. Once we arrive on the other side, we find our dream visitor in quite the pickle, as a small horde of these astral assailants are hell-bent on getting to him. Before we can intervene, we need to patch ourselves up though, so we cast Armor of Agathis and drink a handful of potions, including a viciousness elixir that expands our crit range by 1. Then we hop to the nearest fight, and as we arrive, we find a couple Gith shredding apart friendly Intellect Devourers. Peculiar, but stranger things have happened. Unfortunately, they take out the last brain buddy before we can do a thing, then jump on up to us and start dishing out blows and taking damage in return from our armor. And it did deal a lot of damage, so we do a little repeat casting the armor again, as well as healing up with a potion, which causes the already weakened Gith to take themselves out, and the other one gets knocked prone when they hit us thanks to our Boots of Stormy Clamor and Adamantine Armor, leaving them ripe to get picked off by a repelling blast into the void, all according to plan. When we arrive at the bottom where all the fighting is going on, we find a Mind Flayer getting absolutely walloped. He reveals to us that he is the true form of our dream visitor, and the imprisoned Gith across the room is the source of what's keeping us alive. Without much of a choice, we agree to help him in his fight. But this is a rough one, and we are ill-suited for it. As such, our first attempt doesn't go great, and Shovel grows despondent afterwards, plunging herself into the void for no discernible reason. This, of course, bodes poorly for our next attempt, which is likewise doomed. You know what they say though, third time is the charm, so we go in with Shovel at our side and Armor of Agathis active. For the most part, our foes start by swinging away at the Devourers, taking out most of them. While the Emperor, as our dream visitor is known, uses domination on one of them, which they can instantly break out of. On our turn, we send in Shovel to get Wailing, drop a Darkness to hide in, and start blasting with the help of a speed potion. Alas, the enemies really didn't like that, and our concentration gets instantly broken, Shovel gets exploded into little gibs, and Gunther gets hold-personed as well as brutally pummeled. Thankfully, the Emperor comes in with the world's greatest triple stun, and the one unstunned goon comes down to beat us up, making themselves vulnerable for the Emperor to carry even more and stun them as well, freeing us from the hold person. We spend our turn right after setting up again with a healing potion, followed up by another darkness and refreshing our speed potion. This leaves poor old MP to get dumpstered on, as the Gith finally start focusing on who they actually came here for. In retaliation, he gets a beautiful chain lightning off, taking out one of them and severely damaging the rest. Still, even despite his hard work, we're unable to capitalize as we count on crits to finish them off that don't show up, and we take a big risk in stepping outside of our darkness so that they don't take out our tentacled servant. The plan somewhat works, but we get hit real hard and end up almost dying. As we get up, even with our roughly 45% chance to get a crit hit with each beam, we fail to finish off one of them yet again, putting us in quite the conundrum. Eventually, with our second action, we decide to use a wall of fire, hitting the 3 remaining foes, sorta. For whatever reason, this guy at the end isn't actually inside the wall. Despite the speed pot about to expire, we also use a healing potion so that if push comes to shove we can take a hit as we pray our wall of fire and the Emperor can do the rest of the dirty work. One does die to the wall of fire, but by jumping back into it, and our Mind Flayer underling uses his own blast to kill the one that wasn't in the wall, and by some miracle we survive through our lost turn, taking only 1 hit. Then the Emperor pulls his weight even more, getting a crit hit stun on the remaining fool, and since we're struggling against the Goomly Curse to get a crit, it's left up to our assistant to once again finish the job. With that doozy of a fight out of the way, the Emperor proceeds to monologue at us to try and garner some sympathy and explain how it is totally okay that he was misleading us. And more importantly, he explains that he has Prince Orpheus of the Gith imprisoned and it's his power that is actually keeping us safe. A nameless nobody kidnapping a noble is a big no-no, but we can't do anything about it yet, so we just head out and get back to sleep. It's a beautiful day as we awaken and arrive at the outskirts of the city, that is, until this strange-looking creature approaches us and starts begging. Since most people frown on Eldritch blasting beggars, we simply tell her to go away, though our day is undoubtedly ruined. To make matters worse, the way into the city is closed as Lord Enver Gortash is being coronated along the only road in, which seems like an odd spot, but either way, despite this lady being harder to convince than Ketheric Thorm, we still manage to lie our way in. Once inside, we meet old Gordy himself, a fellow noble who's more than happy to lord over the peasants. He offers us a pact of peace for us to work together and rule over the common man as it ought to be. All we need to do is kill Orin and grab her netherstone, a task we easily acquiesce to. Though admittedly our patron rages at the prospect of the netherbrain being allowed to live. With yet another deal made, we finally make it into the city and start up a long-awaited shopping spree in proper civilization by heading straight to Fitz the Firecracker, a shopkeep who sells us the dead shot. We don't have proficiency with this +2 longbow, but that's okay because we only want it since it expands our crit range by a further 1 so long as we have it equipped. If you're keeping track, that means that we're critting on a 16 or higher so long as we're obscured, or a 17 otherwise, not counting any elixirs. Then we're right next door at Gloomy Fenton's shop buying the Armor of Agility. This 17 AC medium armor lets us add our full dex mod to our AC, effectively making it 20 AC and finally making full use of our dexterity. In addition, we also get a +2 to all saving throws, which is a huge defensive upgrade that's hard to overstate. Our shopping spree continues as we head to the circus of the last days, convincing them to allow us entry. And here we speak to Boney of Stony and Boney's Creations, excellent craftsfolk who offer us a most fitting statue for the measly sum of 5,000 gold. After acquiring it and taking a long rest, it gives us the Sweetstone feature's permanent buff, essentially a permanent bless, granting an extra 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saves, making us even tankier and more likely to hit. While we're looking for a good place to rest our head for the evening, we come across a murdered peasant with bloody marks all across the wall, as well as a convenient note on the floor the murderer left behind with a whole list of common folk that need killing, and frankly, we want in on the fun. Before that though, we head to the local inn and negotiate access to the whole top floor, and for free to boot. The security in this place is just plain awful though, as when we get to our floor, this urchin is here begging us yet again, this time to let her stay in exchange for food. To make matters worse, it turns out it was Orin all along, come to brag about how many more peasants presence she's killed than us and threatens to kill the beggar urchin as well. We really don't care about that though, and at last Orin leaves, letting us check out just how cool our statue looks. Finally, we're living life big. Now we get to investigating who that murderer is, and we find him at a wine tasting, but before we can ask if he'll let us join, he's gone like the wind. Thankfully, he just went down the road and we find him again easy peasy, but once again, fate has other plans as we slip on something, and with all our armor and weapons, he thinks we're here to stop him, so a fight breaks out. Gunter starts off by casting a Hunger of Adar on most of the combatants, slowing him down and dealing good damage. But they start to fire darkness arrows off inside of it. At first, I thought this was just AI being wonky, but it's actually them using an exploit that somehow removes the blinded condition from them, letting Delore the assassin throw paralysis poison at us, but we make the save since we took off the risky ring beforehand. Next turn, we move a little further down and head into a side room before dropping another hunger in the hopes this one will actually blind them. Lo and behold, it actually does work, and we get blasting in this narrow staircase that turns out to be a dead end. The enemies for their part just continue to bumble about in the hungering dark. So we spend the next few rounds blasting away, ticking down their health bit by bit, mainly targeting whoever's closest, until a roaming patrol of guards outside sees what's going on through the windows and jumps to the aid of the rich and powerful, as expected. From here, the fight becomes a lot more simple since most of the baddies decide to double back through the hunger towards the guards, leaving us to start finishing off whoever is lowest health. The guards, meanwhile, do their own good bit of slaughtering, even taking out the main assassin himself. His horrible henchmen join him in the great beyond not long after, and that is that. One reward for this fight is level 9, increasing our proficiency bonus up to +4, our spell slots up to level 5, and letting us learn a new spell in the form of Hold Monster. We also get the Minions of Chaos Invocation granting us Conjure Elemental. I'm not gonna lie, at this point most spells we have aren't gonna be getting used, though Conjure Elemental is still nice to have on occasion. But only on occasion, since I don't really want this to turn into a summoner build despite how good we're becoming at it. Our other rewards are a bag full of hands and another note telling us where to go next and giving us a nice secret passcode to go with it. So we head to the secret door listed on the note, use the secret passcode, and wind up in a secret Ballast crypt, wherein we find the murder tribunal being led by none other than the Ballast Bane of Baldur's Gate, Saravok Onchev. We let him know we'd love to join their little cult and murder the common folk, but they put us through a test first and ask us how we killed, this guy. Only problem is we didn't kill this guy, he's just one of the hands in the bag we stole, but after no saves coming whatsoever, no siree, we managed to lie our way through. All we gotta do now to become a proper ball and ballist is murder a celestial, and that ain't a problem. As simple as that, we're baptized in the blood of our lessers, at the same time gaining access to Orin's hideout. That's not our only reward though, we also get a chat with the Echo of Bazigal, a shopkeep that sells us the Crater Flesh gloves. These gloves are a little wonky. Normally they make it so when you crit you deal an extra 1d6 that then gets doubled because it's a crit. But with Eldritch Blast there's a strange interaction that simply makes it so every crit hit triggers an extra Eldritch Blast beam entirely, effectively dealing 2d10 plus charisma damage and triggering our Mortal Reminder feature. I can't imagine this isn't a bug, but with or without this bug, these gloves are insanely good for us. Before we can continue on any further, if we're gonna be murdering folks, we gotta do it looking good, so we get a style and fit and a rocking hairdo to boot. Look out, Baldur's Gate, Gunter Goomley III is back in town and he means business. Speaking of the town knowing about us, we encounter a journalist in the street who implies tomorrow's newspaper is gonna headline with something vile about us, and that can't stand. Once we make it to the Gazette, we talk to their editor who makes the mistake of saying our presence will be bad for business after tomorrow's article, so we take matters into our own hand and get hit by a walloping watcher right away. Since we're low health afterwards, we misty step up to a hard to reach spot and heal ourselves back up a little. The enemies can't actually do much to us up here, so before you know it, it's back to us and we start the long ordeal of blasting them all down. Alas, our safety only lasts so long, as we give just enough room for a watcher to jump up here and deliver a cruel critical hit. Though we're able to blast them right off, and now we know for the future to stand closer to the edge to make sure they don't have room up here. Soon after, a phantasmal killer lands on us, and that prevents us from moving anywhere, so we resort to blasting who we can see, and when we can't see anyone, we use Call Lightning for a little bit. And the second we can, we go back to blasting away whatever enemies are foolish enough to be in our line of sight. When we get those ones, we lower the bridge to our platform so we can go after the others, but it's super glitchy and doesn't let us walk on it, so we gotta jump. Unfortunately, this results in our regal rear end getting yanked onto the floor, which means we've gotta throw down a jumping potion and then hop back up to our safe spot. Here we manage to take out the remaining Steel Watcher and soon after one Morgoon as well. Since they can't do much, but we've got the high ground. While we're maneuvering around though, we catch the attention of a couple more guards outside. Gunther does his best to keep him at bay, but we get no crits, which means eventually they do indeed catch up to us and have us cornered. Not knowing what else to do, we use an elixir to grant a 3rd level spell slot and drop a cloud of daggers hoping to shred him apart, only for our concentration to get immediately broken, and then we get frightened for a taste of our own medicine. With a couple more Eldritch Blasts thanks to the help of a speed potion, we take out one more and take an inconsequential amount of damage in retaliation. After all, we only need the 1 hit point anyways, because 1 hit point is all you need to Eldritch Blast a dude into the streets below and then obliterate his buddy right afterwards with long-awaited crits. Then we sneak into the basement and pop in a much nicer story written about ourselves. Oh, how good it feels to control the presses. Since no one can write anything bad about Gunther, we just go around and kill some strange fishy-smelling peasants and then some folks kicking back on a hidden beach. Oh, and Volo finally reappears, though shortly blows up since he refused to move from the explosive barrels he was strapped to, even after we freed him, but we avenge his death well enough, before putting down some very, very bad dogs that give enough experience for level 10. This gets us a new cantrip in the form of Mage Hand alongside a new spell in the form of Hex, again, since we swapped it out earlier. Once again, we don't really need new spells at this point, but Hex will be nice on occasion for the extra damage. We also get the Psychic Resistance and Reflection subclass features from our pact that do exactly as the name suggests. Neither of these are particularly meaningful, but they're nice to have. Most importantly, all of our cantrips increase in power, including Eldritch Blast, which now fires a 3rd beam. For obvious reasons, this is absolutely insane. But that's not the end of our power-ups. We also head to the Stormshore Tabernacle and commune with the gods, one of which we make a deal with. In exchange for 3,600 gold, this amount changes depending on the level you do this, we get the Anointed in Splendor permanent buff. This little boon grants a +2 to all saving throws, making us even less likely to actually fail anything, a great countermeasure to our beloved ring. Now we're off to our promised showdown with everyone's favorite mentally misaligned murderer. Beforehand, we summon our loyal servant Shovel and cast Haste, going in with a Vigilance elixir as well. Then we go chat with her, and she rubs it in our face that she gets to kill peasants in the comfort of her own home, followed up by turning into a big ol' monster that certainly won't save her. The execution kicks off and we go first, our plan immediately coming to fruition as we fire at her and she gets frightened. And to make matters better, for some reason a portion of our damage is just ignoring the unstoppable stacks that she gets back every round. With her unable to move, we blast the nearby Death's Head since we're very frightened of their stunning gaze, and they get disabled for a round as well. Only one enemy is actually able to go, and they waste their turn casting Slow on us and Shovel, though we resist. Next turn we blast the Slower off the edge and send every other blast we have towards Orin. While we do knock her prone, she doesn't get frightened. So we run far away up the stairs and attempt to not get one shot, only for her to just skip her turn standing up. We take those. Another round goes by, and this time we do frighten and knock prone Orin, but we have a harder time with the Death's Head, who dodges 2 of our beams. In retaliation, our worst fears come true as we roll a nat 1 on a saving throw against the stunning gaze. But this is exactly why we have Shovel, who is brave and loyal enough to spend a round distracting our foes while we recover. And when we do, with the help of a speed potion, we resume the status quo of using 3 beams on Orin and 3 on the stunner. Once the Death's Head is out of the way, we just blast away Orin while she's laying on the ground helpless. To make things go a little bit faster, we do use a Hex as well, and before you know it, she's down for the count, though this does piss off all of her goons, which are a little tedious to take out, but eventually we do without them standing a chance. Now that Orin's down for the count, we grab her Netherstone, which is embedded in her dagger, a dagger that we are more than happy to have, called Bloodthirst. This dagger does a lot, and we'll be replacing our Club of Hill Giant Strength, and we'll be using it in our offhand. Apart from expanding our crit range by 1 yet again, putting us up to a 15 or higher now, it also gives +1 AC, and when someone misses us in melee, we can use a reaction to hit back at them and apply True Strike. These are the offhand only effects, and it does do other stuff in the main hand, but that's largely irrelevant to us. With Ball's champion conquered, we figured it'd be pretty fun to show off to Saravok, but just in case he murders us, we use haste before the conversation as well, and we have Shovel in tow. He is weirdly happy about the news, but to no one's surprise, the murder tribunal still takes this opportunity to get a murdering. Saravok instantly comes at us swinging, but when he misses an attack, we get to use our new riposte, which conveniently frightens him with a crit. Gunther downs an elixir of heroism since I forgot to do that beforehand, and one of the Bloody Spectres counterspells our first blast, though the second set still goes through and keeps Saravok frightened. The various goons are quite the nuisance though, with one of them taking out Shovel, then the others buffing the big man with haste, healing him up, as well as giving him sanctuary. Not to mention the counterspells keep up, which is just plain rude. So we resort to summoning a fire elemental in the hope Sarevok will break his sanctuary against that. In the intervening turns though, the murder squad cast warding bond on their boss, making him even tankier, and they slow our elemental servant. Only for the Bane of Baldur's Gate to come running up to smack us around a bit more. When it's back to us, we risk the opportunity attacks and try and blast the big man, just to get counterspelled through 30 feet of solid wall. Still, our second blast does frighten him, buying us some time while our elemental starts messing with his goons, all the while we're burning through health potions. Thankfully, we finally get a bit of a reprieve with one goon missing us and another recasting haste on Sarevok. And we finally fire off a blast that doesn't get counterspelled and frightens, letting us focus on taking out the nuisance who's been pestering us this whole way. Well, our flaming pal continues to be a nuisance of his own. Unfortunately, at this point, they recast Sanctuary on the head honcho, which makes things a bit trickier. We try and get him to swing at our summoned companions to no avail, but we can still blast the person next to him, and since the Frighten is an AoE, he still gets stopped in his tracks, at least for now. Then we finally manage to take out the Echo of Abazigal, granting a buff to Sarevok in the process that makes all his hits deal max damage, which is mildly concerning as he lands a whopping 4 hits on our flaming fellow right after, but it's still standing strong. Now we can focus on obliterating the big man since there's no one else to really damage us, and the Sanctuary Lady even gets taken out due to her warding bond. After a few more rounds of blasting away, with Fire Alley getting in on the fun too, and Sarevok screaming like a baby, we take him out and there's nothing he can do. His last goon also falls a moment later, as easy as pie. Aside from incredible bragging rights and claim to all the peons we could want to murder, our reward is Sarevok's horned helmet. This bad boy expands our crit range by 1 just like our current helmet, but no longer requires us to be obscured. In addition, it makes us immune to being frightened as well as other emotion altering conditions. I guess he didn't have it on right or something. With all these boons we've gotten, it's been easy to ignore the family curse, but its occasional appearances still weigh on Gunter, so we head to a self-help place to deal with these feelings. Alas, it turns out to be yet another underground cult that this city is lousy with. Still, they offer to maybe make a deal with us. Just to be safe though, we down an elixir of bloodlust and cast haste beforehand. And it's a good thing too, since Viconia starts yapping about some girl named Shadowheart before taking up arms against us. This fight is simple enough, if not a bit long. We just start blasting whatever cultist is weakest, while Shovel wreaks havoc alongside the very same elemental that helps slay Sarevok. The enemies for their part mostly just struggle to reach us while we backpedal up the very long hallway that we came from with the help of haste. They do unfortunately at one point give Shovel terminal depression, but so long as we keep the strategy up, we've got nothing to worry about. Viconia is even one of the first to fall, and the rest really don't put up much of a fight, especially since they rarely land a hit. Fast forward a dozen rounds of shouting Delore and walking up the stairs, and sooner or later we get them all. For our efforts, we hit level 11, granting us at last a 3rd spell slot, though let's be real, Eldritch Blast is better than most spells we can cast at this point. We also gain Create Undead as a spell we can cast once per long rest for free. This lets us create a mummy to fight alongside us, but once again, I don't want this to be a summoner, so we won't use this all the time. And as another spell, we learn Vampiric Touch. It's no Eldritch Blast, but it can crit, so we take it for pretty much just that reason alone. Now it's time to get looting. We find a hidden room with a cool note talking about a mirror that steals memories, and lo and behold, elsewhere in this area is the mirror itself, which we're able to decipher how to use with a successful religion check. All we need to do is trade a temporary -2 to strength to gain a permanent +2 to charisma, bumping it up to a whopping 22. Well, the self-help place didn't make us feel better, but maybe buying a palace will, so we're off to speak with the owner of the Sar Palace, after blowing his guards to bits since they wouldn't let us in, and yes, a few of them are rats. Then we use their corpses to summon what is affectionately known as the Goon Squad, since we might as well use all these summons together at least once. Once we're inside proper, a sinister looking door bars us from the master of the house. He's certainly not making this business deal easy on us. Though with the help of Mummy, we're able to grab a book to help us with the matter, since Mummy is able to resist the necrotic aura corpse radiating in the room that we find the book in. Then the Goon Squad helps clear out the skeletons in Kazdor's closet and grabs the ring from one of them that we need to pop open the previously mentioned portal. Since we've got everything that we need now, we head back and open that bad boy up, only to find a bunch of squatters in our soon-to-be abode. Time to get clearing them out. Nothing and nobody can stand against the full might of the Goon Squad with Gunter leading the way, and we all get to putting in work. Especially our zombie who starts self-replicating, even forming full humanoids out of the corpses of bats. The massive massacre continues with extraordinary explosions, brutal and beautiful blasts, and classic clobbering finishing the job. Look at our big ol' squad of servants, all happy and proud of a job well done. Continuing on, we head to the basement where we see Cazador Sar himself being a weirdo in the distance, so we prep with an armor of Agathis as well as our beloved haste yet again. Turns out he's doing the rite of profane ascension, becoming some sort of master vampire or something, I don't know, but either way he seems reluctant to talk about selling his palace and tries to murder us instead. As the fight kicks off, he goes for a blight on us that thankfully we're able to counterspell since all of his damage is boosted by an insane amount thanks to his ritual. Either way, when we start our turn in his general vicinity, his pure stank causes 44 points of necrotic damage just for being near him. To weaken him, we send our invisible shovel to stand on one of the ritual sources, which also stops him from getting some of his passive healing. Then we get blasting from the back lines, and despite him being a literal ball of mist, we are still able to frighten and knock him prone. Our servants start tussling with each other at this point, and while we may be outnumbered, the goon squad stands strong, or sleep strong in some cases. While the boys are doing that, we just keep bullying the heck out of poor little Lord Sar. Unfortunately, our weakest servant goes down for the count a moment after, and despite Mummy having a multi-attack that can only be used against frightened foes, it refuses to be used against frightened foes, so we just settled for regular whacking. The Fire Elemental likewise goes down at this point, but with a couple more blasts, Cazador Sar goes down for the count too without doing a darn thing. Now that it's just generic squatters left for us to clean up, we're not stressed, and Shovel is now free to start whooping some booty of her own, even resisting a fierce spell to the face, but not the second time unfortunately, and this weakness is what brings her down. Anyone who is foolish enough to take out our most favored servant will most certainly live to regret it, though not for long. A couple turns more is all it takes for us to clean up the rest of the vermin. With a quick stab to the heart, we also get Cazador as he's regenerating in his coffin, and cause no one is around to question it, we claim the palace as our own. Only problem with owning a palace is the maintenance cost, so we head to Leroican to see if he can help finance us. He's a bit of a jerk about it, but he says he'll give us a good payday if we bring the night song to him, to which we agree. While we're here though, we break into his basement and read a terrifying tome called the Tharkiate Codex, which does curse us a wee bit more. But with the help of the remove curse scroll, we fix the problem and gain the Tharkiate Codex blessing permanent buff. It's a simple effect that grants 20 temp HP after each long rest, but simple isn't always bad. Then we head back to Leroican with a haste active and Dame Aelin in tow. When it becomes clear to her what's happening, she starts to pray while we stare on with a slack jaw as 3 moon-blessed shield maidens descend from the skies, and we wonder, why couldn't she have done this versus Merkel? Regardless, the fight kicks off and each of the Moon Maidens starts concentrating on a moving globe of invulnerability on Aelin, so we've got to take them out first. Leroican's Myrmidons prove themselves useless right out of the gate, so this fight is going to be mostly on us. They are admittedly pretty fantastic meat shields however, so we can blast with relative impunity. And even though normally we'd get hit with a brutal retaliation dealing 12d12 radiant, I think knocking them prone messed with this since they never really do it, and the first of 3 goes down. This routine keeps up for a little while as our meat shields start to get taken out, though some of them prefer to just stay in combat despite being reduced to 0 hit points. Unfortunately, at one point we try and move away from the mediocre Moon Maidens and one of them manages to break our concentration. But even when they wail on us afterwards, we stay standing thanks to our radiant resistance elixir that we took beforehand. Since we're in a bit of a pickle, when we gain control again we cast darkness on ourselves to hide out in while we recuperate. Leroican meanwhile devotes his full firepower to shooting at the invulnerable Aelin. Gunter starts using speed potions as our fallback plan to keep the machine gun fire up, while our payday starts to slip away when the Big L trades a fireball for 80 points of radiant damage. And yeah, you can bet he doesn't live long after that. Well, with nothing else to worry about, we just keep blasting from the comfort of our darkness, taking out yet another, which causes Aelin to start getting salty and she starts sacred flaming the nearby corpses. And a turn later, Gunter takes out the next and final Moon Maiden, leaving the Night Song nice and vulnerable. It only takes 2 more turns after that for us to finish her off, and we really don't need to worry since she is not immune to frightened like her celestial gal pals. Our payday may be gone, but I'm sure no one will notice if Leroican's furniture shows up in our palace. We've got most of our worries sorted out, but before we can go conquer the Netherbrain with Gortash, there's one last bit of payback we gotta get, and that starts by heading to the Devil's Fee. Once we're there, we use our occult knowledge to open a portal to Raphael's realm. Time to show him what happens to people who talk down to Gunter. When we arrive in the House of Hope, we're greeted by Hope, who seems a little bit manic on account of being imprisoned by our Disney-esque devil. She does grant us entry in exchange for us promising to free her, but she makes the mistake of dressing us up like a simpleton in the process, and you can bet your bottom dollar that's going in the Book of Grudges. As we get exploring, we find a locked room that looks awfully richly adorned that we'd love to get into, so we hop our way around the outside of the building to get over to the balcony, where we find Raphael looking rather scandalous. Okay, never mind, it's just some lookalike that he has to do things with, which is concerning in its own right. Either way, when we refuse to submit to Harlep's whims, a fight breaks out. On our first turn, we walk out of melee range and blast down one of the imps, triggering our elixir, which then lets us shoot some more at Harlep, who's not very strong. We also misty step away to get some of the infernal imps to waste their turns dashing, but most still fire eldritch blasts of their own that miss like no tomorrow. Since we're really not in danger, it's not hard for us to spend the next few turns taking out each of the imps. Then with them out of the way, we do a little test run of what we're going to do to the real Raphael. And when all is said and done, we get to roam this boudoir freely, including using the bath to get as many free long rests as we want. That's not all that's in here, as there's a hidden safe as well, with a note detailing a passcode we can get the Orphic Hammer with in the archive, which can be used to free both Hope and Orpheus. The archive itself is easy enough to find just down the hall, and it's got goodies galore, so we break our disguise and get a lootin'. The Orphic Hammer, of course, is just one of the many prizes we grab. Unfortunately, when we step outside the room, the whole house is on high alert, including giant flaming balls of hellfire that stalk us through the hallways. Luckily, they are by no means immune to the sheer power of our critical hits, nor are the many other denizens and debtors of this House of Hope. With them all out of the way, we descend into the depths where we find Hope imprisoned by imps and spectators, which instantly try and blast us off the edge, but luckily they fail, though they don't fail at blasting Shovel to death. We start by thinning down the horde to fuel our bloodlust, while trying to take out the spectators as fast as possible since they can paralyze us, before jumping back to a much safer area. It's a good thing too, because we get paralyzed right after, then blasted a few times, bringing us decently low health and pushing us back. But when it's back to Gunter, we manage to finish off the first of the spectators and use a potion to heal up. While we do feel a lot safer, another paralysis gets us good, and we take so many hits over the next few turns that we have to resort to using counterspells just to keep alive. When we regain control of our body, we start taking out the other imps to ensure this doesn't happen again, and the spectator doesn't even try and paralyze us after they're gone. So we're able to finish it off with a few more blasts and then blow up the remaining imp that stayed in the main chamber. During this fight, we gained enough experience for our final level, for which we take Shatter as our final spell to have some non-concentration AoE just in case. And our final Eldritch Invocation ends up being Dreadful Word, which lets us learn Confusion as well, once again just kinda cause why not at this point. For our final feat, however, we take Tough, which increases our hit points by 2 for every level, effectively granting us 24 more max HP to ensure we don't get one shot. Now that we've achieved our ultimate form and our curse is at its weakest, it's time to free Hope and fulfill our bargain with her. Before we head to the exit, we make sure we're prepared, summoning the entire goon squad, though they won't last long, as well as dropping Armor of Agathis. Not to mention a mirror image and haste as well to maximize damage. On our way out, the expected master of the house returns, alongside whoever the heck this lady is and our old pal Yurgir, who's really strutting his stuff. Since we helped him out earlier, he proves to be surprisingly honorable and deigns to join our side instead, since he views us in a similar light. And then, as all fights do, this one kicks off. Starting with Yurgir absolutely clobbering whoever that lady was, and then dipping out a half second later. The Cambion cronies for their part mostly just miss us rather pathetically, but Raphael himself incinerates the heck out of the goon squad, instantly killing both Shovel and Mummy, only for Zombie to join them in the Great Beyond soon after, and we also take a few hits to the face. When our side finally gets a turn, we start with Hope using Revoke Guest status to disintegrate one of the Cambions near us. Then we get her to Mass Healing Word to fix up the gang, and use her to provoke opportunity attacks so that we won't. Gunter then uses a couple Eldritch Blasts to try and take out one of the pillars and damage another, but we fall just a little bit short with a bad roll. So we fly far away with a potion and get Earth Elemental to stay behind and finish the job, taking out one which reduces Raphael's dex score and makes him deal significantly less damage. Yurgir continues to be a mild annoyance, Hope gets crit again and dies for realsies, and Earth Elemental gets obliterated by one of the Dweebish Devil's supercharged spells. On our turn, we fly back in and finish off the second pillar, healer, further weakening our singing devil to the point where we're no longer worried about being one-shot, letting us use our second action to blast the big man himself, frightening and knocking him prone with the classic combo before, of course, flying far, far away. Unfortunately, the family curse kicks in big style as one of the Cambions gets us with a crit hit, then we roll a crit fail on our concentration check, which is the only way we could have failed it. To make up for it, Raphael skips his turn as he's too busy just standing up, and the others continue to whiff pretty much every attack. It's clear at this point, once we get it to be a one-on-one, we're not worried, so we down a speed potion to try and take out the servants as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Jurgir is doing his best to stand strong, but does ultimately turn into a puff of smoke. Our vengeful massacre continues after he falls, but it's a little tricky since our elixir refuses to proc as reverberations, getting all the kills. This keeps up for the next turn as well, and it's starting to get a little infuriating. The turn after, however, Raphael has finally moved into range, so we hex him and fire a blast at him and a Cambion, leaving just one goon left. With a couple more blasts in the same turn, we really start bullying him as well. Alas, it doesn't keep up as we get a triple miss next turn, which is a bit flabbergasting honestly. But either way, it's the last turn of our last speed pot, so we use a haste spore grenade to end the condition without skipping our next turn. It also gives us haste for a few more turns, letting us finish off the last Cambion and officially bully Raphael to no end. He does get free for a turn long enough to summon a dude, but we just use said dude to fuel our elixir and finish off the not so powerful devil. And then we take out the hellsboar that said dude gave birth to upon death. Even Raphael can do little more than fall to his knees in fear at the sight of our all-powerful eldritch strength. Now all we have to do is take our netherstones to the Elder Brain and end this adventure once and for all. We finally have that chat with Gordy, but when we tell him about how we took out Orin, he threatens us to hand over our netherstones in order for us to work together, only to reveal he was just having a little goofball guffaw to make sure we were as cool as he thought we were. Then he tells us all about how to get to where the Elder Brain is hiding and lets us know that he'll meet us there. Sure enough, we find him awaiting us in the sewers, and it seems we've little time left as the brain will soon be far out of our ability to control it. A little further into the dark and we find the brain itself, looking larger than ever before and evidently more powerful than ever before as it draws us into its psyche. Regardless of how well we use the stones though, it seems to have absolutely no effect on this brainiac behemoth. Turns out this was its plan all along, in order to gain freedom and absolute power that it now uses to dispose of our good pal Gorpash, and I fear we might be next. Before it should take us out, the Emperor arrives just in time to save the day and whisk us to safety, like any good servant would. While we're regrouping and recuperating, we realize now is the best time to free Orpheus and make it clear that no peasant should imprison one of noble birth. But this just causes the Emperor to immediately leave and deliver a quick breakup speech. Well, it's no skin off our teeth since we can just free Orpheus right after he's gone. Though once we do, he's not too pleased with how events have turned out, especially so since it seems one of us must become an illithid if we hope to use the netherstones to defeat the nether brain. But hey, at least we aren't the one that has to do it. Orpheus bites the bullet for the team. Once we exit the astral plane feeling ready, we get a good look at the city and realize it's not doing so hot. This brain better not have messed with our new palace. In the building right next door to where we pop out, we find Bjorn giving a rousing speech to literally just withers. We give our own little addition to the speech and the invisible crowd goes wild. With that, it's time to make our way towards the final showdown, but first we've got to get through the small battalion in our way. Orpheus gets obliterating the masses with his brand new mind flare powers, and we focus on the bigger threats, singling them out and tearing them apart. And as quick as a poor man blows through his paycheck, the fight is over. A little down the way we get interrupted yet again by a full-blown nautiloid this time that's trying to prevent our climb to the base of the brain. We're not worried though, because we could just blast open the door in the way and have Orpheus fly up through the rubble to trigger the cutscene. Now it's time for us to get a climb into the top of the brain where we'll be able to do some real damage. When we get up there, who should show up but the Emperor riding a red dragon to bar our path, despite devoting his whole life against this thing. And so the final showdown begins, and we've got a plan. We start by casting haste on ourselves, then with our extra action, a dimension door scroll takes us most of the way towards our goal. Then with a misty step we trigger counterspell from everyone in the area who's capable of it. They just really don't want us going anywhere. This lets Orpheus use a globe of invulnerability scroll with impunity to begin channeling the netherstones in safety. A facsimile of our dream guardian does try and stop him, but we have a counterspell of our own for that. The various mind flares all try and stun him as well, but he's a tough cookie, and with the elixir of heroism we gave him beforehand, he stands scans through it all. Meaning when it gets back to him, the portal through the Elderbrain's psyche opens up, making it vulnerable at last. Once we're both inside, Orpheus uses Fierce Perilous Stakes on us, expanding our crit range by a further 5 and making it so each hit we land deals an extra 15 psychic damage. Then we get a blasting, only to instantly get mind broken and have our haste fall off, ending our turn in the process. Next round though, we get 2 more Perilous Stakes put on us, and yes, the damage stacks, letting us unleash the world's ultimate Eldritch Blast that would make even our patron blush. And then something unexpected happens. The brain begs for its life, surrendering and offering a deal. We could control it, take its power for ourselves, rule over all. But what of our curse? Will we ever truly be rid of it if we don't fulfill the pact with our patron? No. Instead, we choose to destroy the brain once and for all, freeing us at last of brain parasites, curses, elder brains, pacts, and patrons. Now no one will rule over Gunter Gumli III ever again. Thank you all for watching this feature-length cut. Here's the stats for the whole run. If you guys enjoyed this, I sure hope you'll like the Lone Wolf Honor Mode series that I'm currently working on, for which the live streams are ongoing Sunday through Thursday, so make sure to tune in. Either way, thank you all again, and a special thanks to our Storyteller tier members Bunny Warren, Player 5, Damon, Larry Renzokukin, The Big Yeet, Blaze Lays, LaFay, Mark Rainbow, Vivian, Garrett Sapp, Rat King, and Lovely Velvet.